Shashi Tharoor ji, wait. Your party has got 25 minutes and 3 speakers. Please keep that in mind and start.
Sir, you also like...
that is not what I was told earlier, sir. I was given a different assurance. Please don't stifle our voice when we are trying to raise some fundamental
Whatever
issues.
is decided in BAC, accordingly, Honourable Speaker has allocated the time. That I have brought it to your notice.
We are counting on you to be fair.
Please be kind.
We're counting on you to be fair, sir. The first question is, why is this bill needed? Because on the night of 8th November, the government, or rather the Prime Minister, in a 48-minute address, unilaterally and unnecessarily announced that some 14 lakh crore rupees worth of 500 and 1,000 rupee notes, amounting to 86.4% of all the currency in circulation in India, would be illegal as of midnight. In fact, 3 hours is what he gave our country to pull 86% of the country's money out of circulation, and this in a country where cash has represented 98% of all transactions by volume. Mr. Premachandran has already described why he thinks this is illegal, but within days, the real result of the Modi announcement became apparent: the severe disruption of normal economic activity. Since over 90% of the financial transactions are made in cash, over 85% of our workers in our country are paid in cash, the everyday economy was ground to a standstill in the last 2 months of the year. The government wants to get credit for its bold move, but what inept implementation, Mr. Chairman. It made a mockery of the initial shock and awe with which the announcement was greeted. Appalling lack of elementary planning, which unleashed anarchy on the economy and insecurity and anxiety amongst people. Not nearly enough new currency had been printed, so the banks did not have enough, not even a fraction of what was enough to meet the consumer demand for new notes. They didn't have the new notes, and so they restricted withdrawals to small amounts of cash that were insufficient for most people. This is also illegal, Mr. Chairman, though my friend, the Honourable Mr. Premachandran, didn't mention it, because my question is, under which provision of the law can an Indian citizen be denied access to his own account? Can the finance minister name one country in the world that disallows people from withdrawing money from their own bank accounts? It is merely a mask, Mr. Chairman, for the government's inefficiency in not printing enough notes. 30 days after the Prime Minister's speech, only 30% of the currency in circulation had been restored. The RBI told the Public Accounts Committee on January 18th that it was up to 60%. The SBI estimates it may go up to 70% by the end of February. The Economic Survey claims it will all be back by the end of March, but I don't think so, because the rate of printing of rupees 500 notes has been falling well below the target, and going by the rate at which the printing presses are functioning, it's going to take, I suspect, another 5 or 6 months to remonetize the entire banking system. Anyway, whenever that cash system is fully restored, it's very clear that the Prime Minister's "bear with me for 50 days" was yet another jumla.
Yes.
Now, there's even more inefficiency than that, because the government, when they started printing notes, didn't print enough quantity of the smaller notes. So if you were lucky enough to get a 2,000 rupee note, no one could make change for it for you. And even more inefficiency, the ATMs. It never occurred to the government to realize that if you want to put the new notes into the existing ATMs, they should be the same size as the old notes. They made them a different size, so they won't fit into the ATMs, and then they had to scramble to hire 50,000 engineers across the banking system to recalibrate the notes. Now, more seriously, Mr. Chairman, the lack of cash reduced both consumption and demand. I feel sorry for my friend, the Finance Minister, because he was proud, rightly so, that we were briefly the fastest growing economy in the world. Now we can no longer say that, because a booming economy that boasted the highest growth rates in the world has essentially suddenly become a cash-scarce economy, and the result was, of course, that production went down in all sectors. Small producers could not get working capital. Some businesses even have had to shut down. Daily wage workers, who are, of course, a majority of the labour force in our country, many of them lost their jobs because firms didn't have the cash to pay them. The Economic Survey itself, published by the Finance Ministry, states that demonetisation is, and I quote, an aggregate demand shock, an aggregate supply shock, an uncertainty shock and a liquidity shock. It says the cash crunch must have affected the informal economy. The informal economy accounts for nearly half the overall GDP and 80% of the employment economy, and inevitably it runs on cash. Unemployment now has shot up to a 5-year high of 5%, and according to the All India Manufacturers Organization, AIMO, macro and small-scale industries and traders have incurred 60% job losses and 47% revenue losses because of demonetisation. Not only are the SMEs shutting down, according to AIMO, medium and large infrastructure companies they've surveyed have reported a 35% drop in employment and 45% drop in revenues. AIMO estimates even higher losses of jobs and revenue as of the end of March. Real estate, construction, infrastructure, which provide the maximum employment in our country after agriculture, are set to lose over 1 lakh jobs over the next year. The 8 lakh crore construction industry, which employs 4.5 crore people, has virtually ground to a halt with a drop of 80 to 90% in revenues. There's even been an inventory pile-up because, of course, there's no consumer demand. Look at the economy, Mr. Chairman. All indicators, sales, cash flow, traders' incomes, production, employment were down in November and December 2016. And that's why our former Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, estimated that the GDP of our country would shrink by 1 to 2% for the fiscal year. Local industries, footwear in Agra, garments in Tirupur, rubber in Kerala, and transport everywhere absolutely slowed down, in many cases had to be suspending their work for lack of money. The informal financial sector, rural money lenders who provide loans that amount to 40% of our total lending, that infrastructure has all but collapsed. In fact, rural India is in bad shape. The fishing industry, dependent entirely on cash sales of freshly caught fish, is deeply affected. This is even affecting coastal security, as I pointed out during question hour this morning, because the number of boats going out to sea has been so severely reduced because of demonetisation that we have fewer eyes and ears looking for suspicious activity in our maritime waters. Traders are losing perishable stocks. Farmers are dumping their produce. There's another question today in question hour about that. In fact, there's been a study by economists at the Indira Gandhi Institute for Development Research, which in late November established that deliveries of rice to rural wholesale mandis were 61% below usual levels. Soybeans were down 77%, maize down 30%. The winter crop could not be sown on time because no one had cash for seeds, and therefore the harvest may well be 25% lower. And as I said, Mr. Chairman, we have another crisis when it comes to my own state of Kerala, because rural banking has been severely affected, since the distinct character of our rural banking sector is the major role of the cooperative sector, particularly primary cooperative societies, much more vibrant in Kerala than elsewhere, because over 70% of the deposits in primary agricultural cooperatives in India come from Kerala. Over 70% of the non-agricultural loans and advances made in India are made in Kerala. Over 15% of the agricultural loans and advances in India are disbursed in Kerala. But the Reserve Bank of India prevented all the 370 central district cooperative banks, 93,000 primary agriculture credit societies in the country from depositing or converting old notes after November 8th. And the result has been particularly damaging for my state. And I want to say that it's not just a question of one state. It shows a certain thoughtlessness towards the realities of our rural economy. Dairy, agriculture, and as I said, fishing have all been severely affected. Tourism may not seem very important to some people. It is for us in Kerala a huge contributor to our GDP. It's also vital for employment across the country. But foreigners were given a lot of inconvenience because of demonetisation. Tourists were returning from Agra without seeing the Taj because their notes were not accepted at the ticket window. Travel plans had to be curtailed. Tourism prevails by word of mouth. How will you bring back, Mr. Chairman, the trust of foreigners who have spread the word of their harrowing ordeals in demonetising India? Now, the economic survey has already lowered the growth rate projection to 6.5%. The IMF has come down from 7.6 to 6.6. The CMIE, the Centre for Monitoring the Indian Economy, says it will be only 6% for the next 5 years. So, I know the Finance Minister has made lots of claims about India's growth. I would say he and his Prime Minister have belied the expectations of the people of India. What's interesting is that the Modi Sarkar itself has accepted that demonetisation has had a severe negative economic impact, because in the list of achievements mentioned in the economic survey released on the 31st of January by the Chief Economic Advisor, there's a list of achievements. They mention Aadhaar, GST, FDI, UPI, but no mention of demonetisation. In fact, Aadhaar, GST, FDI are all Congress-initiated programs. So I want to accept the Prime Minister's invitation this morning that we will happily take credit for the few good achievements of this government. The Modi Sarkar also accepts, and I'm quoting from Chapter 3 of the Economic Survey, that demonetisation resulted in slowing growth, demonetisation reduced demand, cash, private wealth, it reduced supply, reduced liquidity and working capital, disrupted supply chains, increased uncertainty, and I'm quoting, still quoting, job losses, decline in farm income, social disruption, especially in cash-intensive sectors. So I would commend to the Finance Minister Chapter 3 of his own economic survey as my indictment of his government. Now, the Prime Minister has been talking about the surgical strike on black money, corruption, terrorism, counterfeiting, but it's very clear that these objectives have not been met. A surgical strike is always precisely targeted, but here the collateral damage is so extreme that the pain inflicted has outweighed any tangible gain. And what are the gains? Let's take black money, for example. The estimate was that many people, rather than attract the attention of the law enforcement authorities and of the tax authorities, would not return their money, they would destroy their black money. Various agencies estimated around 25 to 35% of the specified banknotes would not be deposited by the stipulated dates. And on November 23rd, the Attorney General of India, no less, told the Supreme Court that the government expected that SBN worth 4 to 5 lakh crores would be rendered worthless on account of not being deposited. What happened? Well, it seems that our black money holders have found creative ways of laundering their money, and the result is that most of the estimated black money in circulation, this 4 to 5 lakh crores that the Attorney General mentioned, has flooded into the banks. Now, it seems that some well-placed friends of the ruling party may well have been allegedly tipped off, because the well-connected clearly were able to unload their money. None of them seemed terribly troubled by the November 8th announcement. We don't know, of course, how much has come in, because the Reserve Bank has not given official figures, but it has been widely reported that by the end of December, 95 to 97% of the money in circulation has already reached the banking system. Now, if that's so, and minus the small amount being held by the central banks of Nepal and Bhutan and by NRIs, it looks like at most you will have 2 or 3% at most of all the demonetized specified banknotes undeposited. So the primary objective of cleansing the economy, we can now forget it. In fact, the RBI governor himself has conceded there is no impact at all of demonetization on the RBI's balance sheet, and there may be no liability write-off at all. So the bill's purpose is to extinguish the liabilities of the RBI, but none have been reduced. Now, as we all know, all cash is not black money, all black money is not cash. Most of it has been invested in real estate and other property, gold and jewellery, investments abroad, and round-tripping that has seen the money return to India's stock market as foreign investment from countries like Mauritius. Now, the Prime Minister this morning asked, yes, that's true, but when did you know it? Let me say we have always known it. This party, the UPA government, has all openly said this. I myself have said it in 2 different black money debates in this very House in the last 6 years. So the fact is that the government should also have known it. Then why did they make a scheme that only touches such a small proportion of the black money assets that people are holding? Worse, in the 6 weeks after demonetization, the Income Tax Department announced it had seized 500 crore rupees in unaccounted cash, and strikingly 92 crores of that black money happened to be in new notes. So what's going on? We're finding cases of corrupt officials, including bank managers, being caught red-handed in illegal transactions. Some bank managers were sitting in their banks from 9 to 5 telling people they had more money, and then from 5 to 9 in the evening they were giving money out the back door to those who could launder it. So I want to say, though I am by no means tarnishing all bank managers for the sins of a few, the fact is, Mr. Finance Minister, that in your drive against corruption, you have created new forms of corruption. Black money continues to be generated clearly. It has merely changed colour and shape. Black money has become white by way of pink. And of course, 2,000 rupee notes will take up less space in the launderer's briefcase than 1,000 rupee notes did. Counterfeiting. You all know that you can withdraw notes. We've withdrawn in the past. Series of notes, say those before 2005 were made illegal in 2014. You don't need to demonetize for such an exercise. You print new notes and you phase out the old. If you're going to print new notes, then you have to have strong security features enmeshed with the design in order to prevent counterfeiting. But it seems the government has missed the opportunity to put in credible security features in the new notes it has launched post-demonetization, because there's no new watermark, no new security thread or fibre, no new latent image, and certainly no nano-chip, as BJP supporters were boasting on WhatsApp. So will a mere colour, change of colour and size make them safe? Worse still, shockingly, RBI has admitted that 3 different versions of the 500 rupee note have been printed in haste. If all 3 versions are authentic, isn't it going to confuse the public and make it easier for counterfeiters to get away with their own fake versions? But still, Mr. Chairman, how big a problem is this counterfeiting? The Prime Minister mentioned it on November 8th, but if you look at the statistical facts of the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, under the supervision of the government's own National Investigation Agency, the estimate of fake currency notes in circulation is only 400 crores, or roughly 0.03% of the currency withdrawn. It also indicated that the ability of banks to prevent these notes being deposited was limited because the sudden deadline, sudden announcement, short deadline, lots of money flooding in, they couldn't counter, the machines couldn't tell the notes, tellers had to do it manually, they didn't have the time. So the result, it seems, according to anecdote anyway, is that there has been a lot of fake currency slipping through into the banking system and becoming legitimized. So far from hurting counterfeiters, demonetization may have helped fake currency by being exchanged for new notes. That's the consequence on counterfeit.
Okay, please conclude, Shashi.
On terrorism, the Prime Minister's third reason. Mr. Chairman, please be reasonable. We have a lot
No,
of...
I am quite reasonable. Your party has got 25 minutes. Another 2 speakers you have.
We will all be brief, sir. Let me quickly... All right, on terrorism, let me just say that a lot of studies...
Already 20 minutes, nearing 20 minutes.
Portal, showing that there is no causal relationship between the number of terrorist strikes on Indian soil and the absolute levels of currency in circulation. In any case, we're all seeing reports about terrorists being caught and arrested or shot in Kashmir possessing brand new currency notes. So how are the terrorists being affected? Instead, who has the government hit? Housewives. Housewives who had salted away their savings in biscuit tins or atta tins, they're the ones whose money has had to come out and be put into the bank when even their husbands didn't necessarily know how much they had saved. And then the stories of individual tragedies have been mentioned in this House. Hospitals turning away patients who only had old notes, children suffering, middle-class wage earners unable to buy medicines for the sick, 115 people reportedly dying after collapsing in bank queues, committing suicide, hitting each other, murdering each other, other demonetization-related events. There's even a report in one of today's papers that demonetization has led to an increase in domestic violence cases. So the people at the bottom of the economic pyramid have been the real victims of this policy. And, you know, I do want to say, Mr. Chairman, we've been restricting weddings in the wedding season to 2.5 lakhs each. But it seems if you were a BJP leader, you had no difficulty in celebrating a lavish wedding, even after demonetization. The goalposts have been shifting, Mr. Chairman. One thing, the Reserve Bank has issued 138 notifications in the first 70 days, then has stopped counting. Even the Reserve Bank employees and officers have complained about operational mismanagement, which has dented the RBI's autonomy and reputation beyond repair. And the governor of the RBI has been reduced to a lamb, and he's so silent. It's the silence of the lamb. Now, I just want to stress finally, Mr. Chairman, we're getting new objectives. The finance minister talks about expanding the tax net, but look at the cost at which this tax net is going to be expanded. The Prime Minister talked about a cashless economy.
Please conclude now.
No cash in the banks, no cash in the ATMs, no cash with people. That's the kind of cashless economy we have.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the fact is, sir, He has shifted the definition to less cash. I agree. Less cash economy.
Professor Saugat Rai.
Over 90% of our retail outlets don't have a card reader. Sir, last point.
Speaking on the subject.
The facts are very clear. Very few. Only 6% of Indian merchants and retail outlets even accept digital payments, Mr. Chairman. We are not a society in which, unfortunately, digital transactions can be done without impediments. And the problem is, therefore, we need a very, very significant digital infrastructure before we can do all this. Our Prime Minister
Thank you, Shri Saugat Rai.
Sir, are not building the foundations first.
Fine.
Oh, that was before I spoke.
Yeah, before.
That, you can't count that time, so I was just saying that.
No, I am not counting that. I only expunged that.
All right. The assurance is different.
Saugat Rai. Saugat Rai, only Saugat Rai speech will go on. No, can't. There is a constraint. No, time constraint also you should understand. No, you can't do like that. It is whatever is accepted in BSc accordingly. Madam Speaker has allotted the time. Please conclude now. Shashi Tharoor ji, please conclude.
To conclude.
Please conclude now. I am allowing. No, you please sit down. Why everybody who you want to speak?
Sir, yes. To conclude, and actually the mic was off when I made my earlier point, but just to conclude, however, that the illegality of the entire exercise has been raised by my colleague, Mr. Premachandran. The fact is the Gazette notification number 2652 by the Joint Secretary under Section 26(2) of the Reserve Bank of India Act 1934 nowhere gives the government the power to freeze bank accounts through limits on cash withdrawals. Nowhere gives the government the power to disrupt normal banking operations and impose mandatory disclosure requirements such as identity cards. So the fact is, there is a real question as to whether the contract I promised to pay the bearer can be legally repudiated by the government in this way. And I must say the Finance Minister, who is also a lawyer, should explain to us why this has been done, on what legal basis it's been done, why the minutes of the RBI decision on November 8th and the meeting notes have not been placed in the public domain, why only 4 independent directors attended out of 21 directors in the RBI, otherwise officials took the decision.
Okay, thank you, Shri Professor Saugat Rai ji.
And just to finish,
I am sorry, Saugat Rai ji's speech, only Saugat Rai ji's speech will go on record.